start off with a little word association.
Okay.
What comes to mind when I say these 4 words? Suck, squeeze, bang, blow.
I don't know if we can talk about that on this podcast, man. No, starting a motor.
Okay, pretty close. Pretty close. I was kind of hoping that you would say a fun Friday night in Vegas, maybe once upon a time. But that's the 4-stage or how a 4-cycle engine works.
Yeah.
Suck, squeeze, bang, blow, right? Almost every internal combustion engine on the planet works this way, to include our turbofan engines in our fighter jets.
Target south, 23,000. Big. One target north, boom stack, 36,000, 13,000. Bang. 40 scope, short skate, hot, right.
This is the Be1 Change 1 podcast, where our mission is to help listeners define values, practice integrity, and inspire change.
Our vision is to mentor men and empower them to achieve more by taking responsibility for shaping their own lives.
He's CAS, an evolving man who has been shaped by adversity and continues to grow through his imperfections.
And he's Roscoe, an imperfect work in progress that tries to suck less every day.
Between us, we have over 40 years of Air Force fighter pilot experience with countless hours as trainers, instructors, and mentors.
Join us and learn to take responsibility for your own life as we dive into subjects from leadership to resilience to vulnerability.
Be the one who changes their course. Be decisive, driven, and purposeful. Set the example for others. Lead. We wish we'd had this show when we were younger men.
Be the one.
In the opening scene in Top Gun Maverick, he talked about scramjet.
Yeah.
I didn't know this, so I went and looked it up. Scram is an acronym.
Yeah, I didn't know either.
Yeah, so ramjet made sense, and I was like, well, what the hell is scramjet? So scramjet technology is supersonic combustion ramjet. And scramjet technology has been around since the 50s.
Yeah, well, I think they used a lot of that to build and develop the motors for the SR-71, from what I understand.
That was still a turbofan engine, but
yeah, it was a lot of the.
But that's what led to. In fact, in Top Gun Maverick, the model airplane that, at least from what I could find, it was called an SR-72.
Yeah, and I heard Lockheed actually helped them design that.
Oh, well.
That's what I actually heard.
You want to go down conspiracy?
I don't know if it's true or
you want to
not,
go conspiracy theory?
Like it's not a real jet, right? So, but I heard that they helped them with the designs for what they built for the movie so that it looked realistic.
I don't even know if I would go as far as to say it's not a real jet.
It might be something close to it.
So the rule of thumb that I'd always heard was whenever a jet hits IOC, which means it's now into operations and we're starting to figure it out. By the time that point happens, its replacement is already probably being built in a hangar somewhere.
That's probably true.
So
I mean, there's a lot of crazy stuff that goes on in Groom Lake and Tonopah and Edwards.
It's a lot of undisclosed runways.
And Palmdale.
I'm just saying.
I mean, there's a reason that Palmdale, which is where Lockheed has Skunk Works, is in close proximity to Edwards Air Force Base.
See, we're already getting into good shit here, and we haven't even started yet. We haven't even said what this fucking episode is about.
I know, right?
Right?
Well, you did, kind of. You said Top Gun Maverick.
Well, I mean, that could have just been us sitting around
that's true.
drinking a beer and watching a cool guy show.
Although I couldn't watch it for 3 hours, I'll tell you that.
I didn't watch it. I was pausing. I've seen it now 3 times. I watched it twice in the movie theater last year when it came out, and I went and saw it with my father-in-law. The first time. Yeah, he's a Hornet Wizzo. And so he speaks the Navy language as well. And it was fun for he and I to kind of play back and forth with each other during the movie. There was a lot of ribbing going on anyways.
I bet.
And then I took Colin to see it when I was trying to convince him to join the Air Force. I took him to go see it more as a motivational. I mean, I said it, I think in the first episode that we did, how the first Top Gun, when it came out, that was what captivated my attention and really got me into airplanes in general and fighter jets and all that stuff. So it was really kind of the leading recruiting tool for a lot of years.
Yeah, it was big when we were kids, that's for sure.
And nowadays, with the numbers as low as they are, the recruiting numbers across the board, regardless of service, I'm really hoping that this serves the same purpose here in 2022, 2023, where it'll start to energize some of these younger kids. You know, there might be a 9-year-old that saw Top Gun Maverick and maybe doesn't want to grow up to play shirtless football on the beach, but he wants to fly fighters.
Yeah.
So I guess that's a dead giveaway of what this episode's about.
Yeah.
Top Gun Maverick.
Kind of.
Let's have some fun with it.
All right.
So,
well, hold on. Let's say what we're going to
go.
do. Let's say what we're going to talk about.
Go
Before we get started, what we're going to do today is we're going to look at 4 of the main characters in Top Gun Maverick, which is Maverick, Rooster, what was his name? Hangman and Bob. Yep. And we're kind of going to go through each one of those and pull out some things that we both saw about personality traits and egos and have a discussion around it. Maybe values.
But there's so much more.
There is.
There's so much more.
So go ahead, Roscoe.
I was just thinking about the symbolism of the first scene of the movie and the last scene of the movie. Tom Cruise in a hangar working on his P-51. He happens to have his own repair manual there and, his 10-millimeter socket, which we all know is bullshit because nobody can find the 10-millimeter socket.
That's right. And,
but I thought
by the way, all captains in the Navy can afford a P-51, just so you know.
True.
Yeah.
He probably had it donated to him somewhere. Knowing him, he probably stole it.
Yeah.
But the symbolism I thought was kind of cool about, from the first movie with him and Goose, and he never really got past that.
Mm-hmm.
And you saw glimpses of that even in this movie, but kind of maybe there's some symbolism there with his P-51 about just living in the past too long, man.
Yeah.
And then we quickly cut into him being in the Death Star, which is really awesome.
Yeah.
Trying to go Mach 10 and whatnot. Well, that first scene where he's taken off basically against orders.
Yep.
He's been ordered to stand down. He goes, you know what? Screw the man. I'm going to take off anyway, and we're going to try this out.
Yeah.
And he blows the lid off of the shack at the end of the runway with what was that guy's name? Ed Harris.
Yeah.
Is standing there, Admiral so-and-so. He's standing there, and he just gets his toupee blown off. All right. Well, I have a real-world story about that.
Okay.
I got to tell this cool guy story.
Okay.
Right? So we're in Bagram, 2008, and flying Strike Eagles in Operation Enduring Freedom. And Bagram sits in a bowl, surrounded by mountains on all sides. And so our standard takeoff profile was max AB, get the gear up, hug the deck to 400 knots, and then jack the nose to get up out of any kind of surface-to-air threat.
Yeah, we did combat departures in Iraq all the time, too.
Shoulder-fired missiles, the SA-7s were prolific over there and whatnot. So hug the deck had some...
Yeah, there's some
rules.
There's some room.
Right?
There's some room for interpretation there.
Well, we had a pilot that was exploring the space a little bit, and he was intentionally holding it down pretty close to nape of the earth, and he buzzed a bus. The road that goes around the airfield, the ring road, we had to ride the bus from one side of the airfield to the other every day to go flying, and the ops group commander was on this bus. Right over his head, shakes the whole bus, and just like the Admiral in the first Top Gun, spills his coffee, and he's pissed, right? So he comes and yells at our squadron commander. Squadron commander then yells at our pilot, grounds him for a few days, slap on the wrist, whatnot. No shit, guy does it again, and the OG in the same bus at the same spot got buzzed by the same dude. And so that guy got unceremoniously sent home from Afghanistan, and he never flew jets again.
Yeah.
So
that's the reality.
That's reality. And that's, leading into what I think is probably going to be a really fun discussion here. It's going to be Top Gun is a drama. It's not necessarily a documentary.
It's a movie.
Yeah. So Hollywood prevails.
Yes.
Moving into, kind of after that scene where he gets stood up in kind of the same fashion as the first movie, really. Gets stood up by the man, and he kind of has that same. Remember I can't remember the captain of the boat. He always had that cigar in his mouth, and
the first
I can't believe this. I got to sing to your Top Gun. Well, Ed Harris's character basically says the same damn thing, and sends him back. And you can tell that Maverick just really doesn't want to go.
Yep.
What had changed? Because like when he was a younger kid, that's all he wanted. He was just foaming at the mouth to go to weapons school, to go to Top Gun, man. And then here we are. I mean, in the movie, we're 30 years later or something.
Mm-hmm.
But what changed?
Well, my guess is for him at that point, when he was a younger man, he was trying to prove himself. He was trying to prove that he was the best. And one of the ways that he felt he could do that was to go to Top Gun and be number one and put that patch on his shoulder. Because Top Gun or the Air Force Weapons School for us in the Air Force, you have that patch on your shoulder. When you walk into a room, it's instant credibility, right? It's, okay, that guy's gone and done something hard and knows what he's doing in the jet. So that's my guess, where by that point, 30 years later, he had already achieved probably most of the accolades that he was looking for. He was in the movie the only guy that ever shot down 3 jets or whatever, and had done all these different things, had kind of pigeonholed himself off into a small corner where maybe he could do what he wanted to do without a lot of adult supervision, which is what it seems like he was doing in the test world. And so I think that's what changed for him.
Which, by the way, just a sidebar, it's not unheard of to go, line IP to Top Gun and then eventually go to weapons or to test pilot school.
Yep, some guys do.
I know a handful of
There's
guys.
a couple. Most guys go one track or the other for the most part.
Yeah.
The vast majority.
But it's not unheard of.
But it's not unheard of.
Yeah, so that's not totally made up, I guess. But it sounded like he was, or kind of the gist that I got, into this second movie was he was sort of trying to remove himself from Gen Pop a little bit. Like, I don't want to deal with people.
He's out in the middle of the Mojave Desert living in a hangar by himself.
Yeah.
I'd say that's fair.
So that's just an interesting transition from the first movie to the second movie, just watching his character arc and how maybe his values had changed over time. He's now in 06. He's not really in charge of anything.
Yeah, maybe he just had a little more flexibility in his older age, too, because he had a little more rank, instead of flying the line, being an ops guy kind of a thing. I think what's interesting for me in general, though, is so the hero of the movie is Maverick. And what's Maverick? He's a loner.
Yeah.
He's a rule breaker. He's a guy that doesn't think any of the rules apply to him. He can do whatever he wants.
Generally speaking, yeah.
He has a very difficult time expressing feelings and maintaining relationships, whether it's female or male.
Yeah, how much of that's
Rooster.
accidental versus on purpose?
Yeah.
I don't know.
But you just look at the track records, right? Like that's just how it is.
Leave a wake of destruction behind you.
Yeah, and then he likes to push boundaries. Can't forgive himself for the past. Can't break away from his past. Like he hasn't taken any of the time required to deal with all of those issues that follow him.
Yeah,
in those regards. And so it's just, that's interesting to me, right? Like that's your guy. That's the male. That's the cool, super cool fighter pilot that everybody should emulate and try to be like, is this dude who's a total loner, completely messed up emotionally, can't deal with his past, and it thinks none of the rules apply to him and doesn't want to be accountable to anybody for it.
I bet you we both know a long list of people that are like that.
There are some people that I know that are like that, but I mean, dude, as you know, and as you just kind of alluded to with your cool guy story, there's not, if you have that attitude in the Air Force, especially flying fighters, you're not going to be around very long.
Yeah. There's not a high tolerance for it.
Nope. There's not a high tolerance.
And not only from a rules and instructions and boundaries standpoint, but from a peer review standpoint.
Yeah.
There's just not a lot of room.
And that's not to say that there aren't times where you can smartly question your leaders or provide advice to your leaders about something, or that there aren't times where maybe you do lean forward in the jet and push a little or be a little more aggressive around something. But a lot of that has to be very tempered.
Yeah. And, a note that I had written down from the movie is there are several instances throughout this 2-hour tale of just outright disrespect.
Yeah.
For authority and rank.
Absolutely.
And dude, that shit doesn't fly.
No.
Like, okay, we always talk about the rank is off in the debrief,
Yeah.
but that's behind a closed door with only the dudes that were there.
So all I'm going to tell you is if you're a test pilot and you take an aircraft up on a test, unsanctioned, and then because your ego's so fucking big that you have to push it above Mach 10 to see what you can do, and you trash that however hundreds of millions or billions of dollars that have been dumped into that program, there's no 4-star admiral, whether he's pack fleet or not, that can save your ass.
Yeah.
Like
there's no Iceman coming
You're
to
breaking
rescue
rocks
you.
in Leavenworth for the rest
That's
of your
right.
life for that.
Yes.
So let's just make sure that that's clear to everybody.
Again, drama, not a documentary.
Yeah, and in some respects too, like the thing that hit me was, what a fucking dick move for all the people on that team that were working on that jet.
Yeah.
Now they were all like going, oh yeah, this is cool, go Maverick, because it's the fucking movies, right? But dude, he just took that entire program and trashed it for his own fucking ego.
Yes, but there's a couple of lines exchanged in there between Maverick and the warrant officer, Hondo.
All
right. So Hondo, as he's getting ready to step to the jet, Hondo says, Mav, you know what happens if you do this, right?
Yeah.
And he kind of looks around at the team and he goes, well, I know what happens if I don't. Because the program was going to get scrubbed
Right.
anyway. All right. So in that
But then
regard,
he scraps it by blowing up the airplane.
You see, and this is true throughout the movie. You see these glimpses of compassion,
Sure,
from Maverick, and
that's true. I'll give you that.
Glimpses, and maybe not just wholesale until maybe the very end, where everybody embraces in this big hug. And
I guess my point is, in the real world, everybody on that team that went ahead and
Yeah.
followed him in doing that would have been breaking rocks next to him in Leavenworth as well.
Oh, 100%. 100%. Because at any point, any one of those guys could have said no.
Yeah, they were all followable.
Yes. So there's a lesson to take away from there. Don't just blindly follow what you think the guy in charge wants to do. If it's dumb, anybody has an opportunity to stop that shit.
Yeah, that's true.
All right. So following that, he gets called back to Top Gun.
Yep.
All right. And he's standing in front of two admirals.
Mm-hmm.
And that was a comical conversation. They started breaking out what the mission is.
Yeah.
All right. And I thought that this was a good, we're going to have some fun discussion around this.
God.
All right. Well, I mean, just from
It's Hollywood. I got it.
let's just go.
The
into this.
cinematography was awesome. Let me just say that.
It was fabulous.
Yeah.
I think the Blue Angels flew a lot of the real scenes
Yeah,
out there.
the cinematography in it was.
They actually
was
had the
phenomenal.
actors in the back seats.
Yeah.
I mean, it was
Cinematography was.
it was great. And this is in no way bashing the movie. I love the movie.
Yeah.
I thought it was great. But let's separate some fact and fiction here. You're at Red Flag.
Yeah.
Red Flag is a giant large force exercise put on by the Air Force a couple times a year. And I mean, we're talking hundreds of planes in the sky at one time, literally hundreds, thousands of people involved in this every day for like 3 weeks.
Yeah.
What's the planning cycle for that?
That's a whole day before.
12 hours.
12 hours.
They had 3 weeks to
Yeah.
plan up a mission. 3 weeks.
Yeah,
to
and it
plan up a
wasn't that
mission.
difficult.
Seriously. Okay, you're going to fly in a canyon, low level.
Well, and they were doing it with 4 aircraft.
You're going to pop to a target, and you're going to put LGBs on the target.
I could have put
Like-
a better plan together for you with 60 aircraft in 8 hours.
Seriously, I wrote down here. I was like, really? I mean, this was like a standard 4 flug upgrade in the Strike Eagle.
Yeah,
We would
same.
fly in low level, pop to an LGB attack, and then dive
This
back
is your
out.
low-level pop attack ride on
Seriously.
any upgrade.
Did you ever go to the
Minus
to
I have to pull 12 Gs in the recovery part.
well, rip the wings off the F-18. We'll get to
Yeah.
that. Did you ever go up to the Hags bombing area up the North the Utah Training and Test Range?
No, I'd never been up in the north side, just the south side.
Okay, so up there, they got the Hags. I forget what that stands for, but it's on the east side of a mountain range. And so the cool attack is to load up your jet with Mark 82s, 500-pound, pretty much dummy bombs, right? And you fly in at 500 feet, and you do a whip pop over the mountain. So you're coming into the target area inverted. You have just enough time to roll out, plink it off, and then get. So
then
like
go.
these attacks that they're doing. This is common.
It's what we do every day. Dude,
seriously.
I had to do low-level CBU in weapon school, and that's no fun because like the safe escape maneuver for that is stupid ridiculous because those bomblets can go everywhere.
Well, they were dropping 2,000-pound. At least what they had on their jet was 2,000-pound GBU-24s,
Yeah, which are
Payboy 3s.
penetrators.
Yeah. So, I mean, they would have done the job for sure, but there's so many other weapons out there.
Yeah.
Like, we got to have this exact impact aim. Dude, JDAM from 20 miles away.
I know, and they were
like,
they talked about GPS jamming, but come on, man, you could have taken one B-2 stealth bomber and flew it over that. None of those SA-6s would have ever seen it and been done in a day. Easy.
I wrote that down. I was like, one B-2 takes
Yeah.
care of this entire movie.
That's right.
This movie's 5 minutes long.
Yeah.
Like, all right. So whatever. That was a lot of comedy from people who understand that. And I'm sure it's the same if like, boxers are watching boxing movies, or like my wife does this with nursing movies all the time, or nursing shows. She goes off on, they never leave the bed rails down,
Yeah.
shit like that. So then he's introduced to us. Oh, whoa, there's the bar scene. And this is where we get introduced to the characters.
Yeah.
Really the meat of the characters. Maverick, obviously he's going to be the mainstay, but then this is where we meet Hangman for the first time. What was your first impressions of Hangman?
He's a complete douchebag, man. That's my impression of Hangman. Like, and so my impressions of Hangman are ego-driven, out for himself in the accolades. He's a bully. And in my experience, most of the time, those guys that are bullies with a lot of bravado are very insecure.
Probably valid. Yeah. He also happened to be probably the best pilot in the room.
He probably was.
I mean, just as far as raw talent.
Yeah,
was,
sure as raw talent. But see, but that's, and I'm sure we're going to talk about this though, right? But that it's so much more than that, right? It's not just about the raw skill you have necessarily.
Yeah.
Because
Well, it's not even just talking about pilots.
No,
right
not
now. This
just
is
talking about
this is
pilots
people
in
in general.
general.
Yeah.
But even in pilots too, right? Because you don't execute as a single ship unless you're Hangman at the last scene where you're shooting down the one last Su-35 or whatever, right? Because, they're going to launch him by himself. Everything's 2-ship minimum, 4-ship typically. I mean, our baseline employment was 4-ship always, except for Iraq and Afghanistan.
That was a special war where you enjoyed air superiority, though.
Yeah, and that's the only reason we were doing it. Yeah, it's just funny to me.
Well, let's deep dive into that for just a second, right? Because like we both lived in the single seat world for a really long time.
Yeah.
And there's a certain mentality that goes into that.
Yeah.
Like you have to know, not think, but you have to know that you have your shit together.
Yeah, but there's a difference between cockiness and confidence.
True, but I'm getting to a point here. True. But at the same time, even though you are a lone dude and you're the mayor of Cockpit City, you're still part of a team.
You are.
And there's a reason that we have wingmen. Wingmen check each other's six. And there's a reason that it's important to be in the correct formation and do these things correctly, right? You have a flight leader, and then you have an extension of that with the wingmen, and everybody has a role on that team. Like nobody's going out there in their Viper or their Eagle or their F-35 and doing this shit by themselves.
Yeah.
This is a metaphor for life, right? You're not gonna go out into real life and be expected to execute by yourself. So learn how to rely on your teammates.
Yeah.
And help your teammates. Like in the last episode, you were talking about accountability being a piece of integrity. And I think that's so huge, man, because when you walk back into the room at the end of a mission, it's holding yourself accountable.
Yeah, it's accountability
it's
central.
Holding your wingmen and your flight mates accountable, and it's allowing them to hold you accountable.
Or GCI if you had weapon directors on that specific ride, right?
100%.
It's everybody in the room you hold accountable.
Yeah, 100%.
Red Air for their presentations. I mean, you've been to a weapon school support, right?
Yeah.
What happens if you get a shot call wrong in a weapon school ACMI debrief?
It doesn't end well.
No, you're done, right? So accountability is a big piece of it.
Yeah. I thought that was, my impressions of Hangman were almost identical. Just one pile onto that was he's probably been the guy that's been told he's the best his entire life.
Well, he's probably outperformed everybody in he's the guy that outperformed everybody in every training program that he'd been in, whether it was pilot training or the F-18 RAG.
Take it back to high school.
Whatever, maybe a good athlete
when he was growing up,
performer in high school.
It's clear. I mean, he's all cut up with shredded abs and stuff. It's clear that he's an athletic guy, right? And takes care of his body and stuff. And so probably from the time that he was a young kid, he's been told, you're the best, man.
You know what cracks me up, though? So I was having this conversation because Alicia and I watched it together. She's like, Hangman is, ice from the first. We were talking about the corollaries.
100%. Yeah.
I don't think so. I think he's math.
Oh, see, I don't know.
Egotistical. I'm number one. I'm the best. I mean, the thing ice flew ice cold, right? But he didn't leave his wingman.
That's true. He also wasn't in the
tactics
in the movie.
He was tactics cold, but
in the movie he wasn't afforded that opportunity. If he were afforded the opportunity, do you think he would have done it?
No, because I mean, he was just as egotistical as far as the bravado that they try to show in these films and stuff like that. But no, man, I think Hangman was more the reflection of Mav in the first movie before the tragedy with Goose than he is Iceman.
I could see that. There's definitely lines of parallel between the two. I personally would have leaned a little more towards Ice.
Yeah, well, I think that's how they
Ice,
set it up.
In the opening bar scene in the first movie, Ice is the one that's like, "Hey man, did you figure it out yet?
Yeah, I
who's
know.
the best pilot?" And that's almost word for word what
I know
what Hangman says. So I think that was probably intentional. Anyways, yeah, Hangman, douche. I think I agree on that.
All right, douchebag.
If he were in our squadron, he would probably be plugged in as like Red 4 for a couple of months to get him to just knock him down a peg.
Here's a perfect example. I'm not sure if you had retired yet, but when we were in the 425th together, the Sings brought over this kid who was already a 4-ship flight lead, really young, super good, like had all the requisite skills, smart, good hands, like flew the jet very well. And he comes into the squadron, and I mean, he ain't no fucking stink on me, right? And so I talked to Stealth, and I'm like, what's the deal with this cat? And Stealth's like, he's super early to everything. He'll probably go from here to weapon school. He's on the fast track. And so I had a sortie. I don't remember what it was, but there was something that I saw in a debrief with him, and he was just a total dick. And so I went to Stealth, and I go, I want you to put me on the schedule with him tomorrow, BFM. Let's see how good this fucking kid
Mono
is.
and mono.
Let's go see what happens.
BFM is 1v1 dogfighting.
Yeah. And so we go out there. So he comes up to me before he comes into my office, he's like, sir, we're flying. I see we're flying tomorrow now. What do you need me to do? I go, dude, you're going to lead it. You can build it however you want. You can be on all offense. You can be on all defense. We can do a mix of offense, defense, and high aspect. Whatever you want to do. I said, brief the motherhood. You can give me a brief of offense, defense, or high aspect, whichever one you think you know the best, and we can talk about your brief afterwards. And I said, and then we'll just go see what we do. Give me your best game.
Right on.
So we go up there, and dude, I fucking destroy this kid on every set. Even when I'm on defense, I'm crushing this kid's will to live. And not a dick about it. I was not a dick about it in any way. Not on the radios. When we get back in the debrief was very professional and all that stuff. But it was just, he needed to know that he still had a lot to fucking learn.
Yeah.
Like, I needed to break him down a notch because he had been in the squadron for a couple of weeks and I had seen it and I'd heard the grumblings a little bit. And so, yeah. So that's what I did with guys like that.
Sometimes we need to get knocked down a peg.
Yeah.
And I'll share a little secret with you. I was Hangman for a long time. I was that cocky, my shit don't stink. I too had been propelled ahead of my peers and been told that I was the best for a long time. Guess how many friends I had at the end of the day?
Yeah.
This is why. So I was in the on-deck circle to go into the instructor upgrade as a lieutenant.
Yeah.
I had like 350 hours or something.
Which is very rare.
Very rare. But my commander saw exactly what you saw in this other kid. And he held me accountable to it, took me out of the on-deck circle, and I never got back in. And it was 100% because of my attitude. 100%. So when I sit here and I talk into this podcast about having been there and done that and lived through some of this shit, yeah, man, I could be sitting here with a patch on my arm too had I had a better attitude because I had the ability, I had the brains. Sure. Shit didn't work out. Now, looking back into it, hindsight 2020, I mean, I was grumpy for a long time. Yeah. And it still took me, after that, it still took me a couple of years to learn the lesson.
Sure.
But I still believe that everything happens for a reason. Mm-hmm. And I'm at peace with it now. There is a part of me that sometimes lays there and goes, what if? But I'm past that. I'm not looking in the rearview mirror anymore.
Yeah, well, the only thing I would say to that, Roscoe, too, is that some of the best instructors that I had in my career in the Air Force didn't have a patch on their shoulder.
Well, yeah, I mean, it wasn't about that. But think about why I was driven to do that, being in that position at that time.
Yeah.
You know?
No, I understand.
It goes back
I was
to
there too.
My discussion about being in the fraternity.
Yeah,
you know,
I was there too.
It was my value set was all fucked up.
Yeah.
You know, and I had mentors at the time. Some were decent, some were not decent.
Yeah.
And I chose to follow the not decent ones, and I paid for it.
Yeah.
Thankfully, I learned my lesson. At least I think I did, at least partly. And we're sitting here able to have this conversation.
Yeah, and let me hit on the mentor thing one thing real quick because you don't see this. I mean, there's a little bit of it in the movie because Mav's kind of brought in to mentor these guys to be able to do this mission or whatever. But what I can fundamentally say is I may have had the raw talent and the requisite skills, but if I had not seeked out certain individuals, a patch wearer of mine named Frag Job when I was a young punk in Korea. If I wouldn't have had a guy like him or a guy like Crusher Feeder who was a punk with me in Korea who held me accountable and we would do a bunch of stuff on the weekends to get better. A non-patch guy that taught me how to do seed, suppression of enemy air defenses like nobody else could, named Scary Sherry, who was a reservist. You know, if I hadn't sought those guys out over and over and over again and asked the questions, made them go to the Sims with me, I wouldn't have gotten to where I was. So my point in saying that is, like you said a million times, and like you said at the beginning of the podcast, it's not about being the best individual and hoorah, I'm the best, blah, 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 blah. Like, you got to seek out the people that can help you get there.
Yeah. And
that's why mentorship is so important.
Yeah, I think there's so many good stuff. This is going to be like a 2-hour episode. There's so much good stuff to take away from here just in real life. And I know we're talking about a drama, but as you were sitting there talking, I was thinking, I just started reading this book called The Intentional Father. And his whole intro is talking about, look, dads, your son may not always come to you and ask you to help him with something or help him through something. So you have to be proactive. And I think you and I both sitting here we're able to look back into our past and go, man, we say it in the opening. This is the podcast that we wish we'd have had when we were young men.
Yeah.
You and I, our generation, we need to be proactive and go seek out these kids and help them, because a lot of them don't know what they don't know.
Yeah, that's so true.
You don't know what questions to ask, man.
Yeah.
And until I start poking a little bit and you go, huh? So we can't, as a generation, I mean, you and I are pushing a half a century here, but as a generation, we can't expect these younger kids to have it figured out. We have to go and help them, and we have to be proactive about it. You have to.
Yeah.
All right, so bar scene still.
Yeah.
All right, we just got introduced to Hangman, and in
Bunch
walk
of the other pilots.
In walk a few more of the characters, which Phoenix is a really
she's cool.
She's an interesting character from a lady's a lady's point of view, like this quiet, cool, confident. If you're a woman aspiring to things, she's a great role model.
Yeah, totally.
I thought the way she carried herself through the whole movie was spot on.
Yeah,
man.
she was awesome.
She was confident. You could tell that she was very confident. And she's in, I mean, you and I've, in the fighter pilot community, it is largely male dominated.
It is.
So when a female walks in with that kind of confidence, that's hell yeah, man. You can be part of my team anytime.
Absolutely.
So then we get introduced to Bob. What were your impressions about Bob?
Yeah, I love Bob.
Bob's cool.
Yeah, Bob's my favorite. So what I would say about Bob is he's the silent professional.
Yeah.
He's patient. He's a listener. I think he's very confident in his abilities, and obviously he executed very well.
Yep. Knows his role.
Definitely a team player. Yeah, knows his role, which is another thing that we teach guys in a fighter squadron is know your role and never miss the opportunity to shut the fuck up.
That's right. Sometimes you are to lead, sometimes you are to follow.
But one thing I noticed in that entire movie is everybody's bad-mouthing Hangman to each other. So the bar scene that we're talking about, right? Like then Rooster walks in and Phoenix and him have a conversation. Oh, Hangman, blah, 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 blah. And you kind of get this, the impression that, okay, everybody knows this is Hangman. This is just how he is. And nobody likes him.
Yeah.
Bob was the most courageous of all of them, because outside of Rooster trying to pick a fight with him when he started talking about his dad, Bob's the only one that ever called him out in a formal setting.
Exactly.
He's the only one that stood up to the bully.
That's right.
When he's sitting there and he's like, well, he's going to pick the best men. You guys need to figure this out. And he looks at Phoenix and he makes some whatever misogynistic comment that he makes. And then Bob goes, oh, yeah, that's about standard, And he starts, Bob's the only one in the entire movie the entire time. Maverick didn't even do it. He's the only one that ever stood up to him.
Now, I wrote down almost the same thing, man, about being just a quiet, cool. And I wrote down that he's very detail-oriented.
Yeah.
And that went to both how he carried himself just in that bar scene even, and then all the way through to the mission execution. You could tell that, man, that guy was squared away.
Yeah, he was.
He was squared away. And sometimes here's your life lesson, I guess, or at least from my point of view, is you don't always have to swing the biggest stick.
Nope.
You can be a quiet, cool dude, man.
You don't have to be the loudest guy in the room.
That's right. And people say that when you walk into a room, you should be fearful of the quiet guy, because he's the one that's taking notes.
Yep.
He's the one observing
he's catching
everything.
It all.
Yep. And when the shit gets ready to go down, he's the one you got to look out for.
That's right.
So, anyways, I loved Bob
all
the way up until the shirtless football scene, which we'll get to in a minute. He was the only dude out there with a shirt on. I mean, the chick didn't even have her shirt on. Come on, Bob. And then Rooster walks in. He's the last of the four that we'll kind of deep dive into. Rooster, I think that they tried really hard to make him appear to be very much like his dad, even though his dad wasn't in his life.
Bob was the closer one to Goose in this movie, I think.
So. I do. I think so. But in that bar scene, I think that they tried really hard to make it seem like, hey, he's a chip off the old block.
Well, sure, with the whole song and everything.
Part of his DNA. And so everybody else is in their uniform. He walks in with a Hawaiian shirt on and his Ray-Bans.
Yeah.
So everything from that all the way up to the bar or the piano and all that good stuff. But you could tell, just like Goose in the first movie, everybody liked Rooster, except Hangman maybe.
Yeah.
But everybody liked him.
Yeah.
Just like kind of very similar to Goose's character.
Yeah, Hangman probably didn't like him because he's so insecure. And
he's a threat.
He was the only one he saw as a threat.
Yeah, exactly. And maybe rightfully so.
Maybe.
His ego had put up a barrier to where if he ever got found out, he had a chance to lose for maybe the first time. And it was probably going to be a big blow to him.
Yeah.
So anyway, so that's our team.
So what you want to talk about? You want to give me your thoughts on Rooster at all?
I think Rooster's got some deep-rooted issues.
Some daddy issues.
I think he had, I don't know if it was a confidence thing or just he was conservative. He was very conservative in the way that he went about it. And I think it might've been a fear of failure.
Yeah. I think he was afraid to make a mistake.
Yeah. I think maybe a fear of failure was probably driving his conservatism, but it could have been some daddy issues. And he definitely harbored a lot of rage and anger
towards Maverick.
Yeah,
for sure. So he's that, to me, if we go back to the fighter squadron example, he's that very competent, capable four-ship flight leader IP who just lacks that aggressive edge, because he was conservative. He was afraid to make a mistake. He's afraid to push it up.
At the same time, I mean, he's a weapons school grad.
He is.
I mean, he's obviously done some things right.
It, yep.
And you don't get there by being a chucklehead.
Well, it was funny because he would sacrifice to save team, but he wouldn't push to win. So there's that whole scene where, Maverick's about to shoot down Phoenix and Bob on the BFM, which is why they're fighting BFM when they're fucking Top Gun grads, whatever.
Yeah.
But great cinematography.
Yeah.
And he does whatever the move is that ends up getting him shot down first, that gets Maverick off of Phoenix and Bob or whatever. But then he won't push the power up in the valley in the low level to stay on time.
Yeah, I'll blow through the hard deck down to 500 feet.
Yeah, and almost dirt my fucking self, but I won't go above 420 knots on a low level.
How much of that's Hollywood versus real life?
I know, it's movie,
but no, I mean, but there's
whatever.
some of that's valid though. I mean, because I've known guys who were like super aggressive on some missions, but then you put them in other missions and they're very
it's
timid,
a comfort level for some guys, right?
Yeah.
And what I used to always tell guys in the squadron was, you got to find that balance. It goes back to balance. You got to find that balance, because if you're just wild dingo and you're the aggressive hangman, that's always pushing forward, fuck it, bonsai, here we go. Yeah, you're going to win sometimes, but you're also going to get your ass completely handed to you sometimes too, right? And some of that's a learning process with the younger guys. Like you've said in previous podcasts, I'd rather make you make the wrong decision aggressively than sit there and make no decision at all. But you got to find a way to temper it. You got to know when to go for the throat and when you need to give it one more leaf.
There's definitely good valid points in that for sure. I think he would have found a good role as like an FTU IP.
Yeah, probably.
Not maybe
same
not a
thing every day.
Yeah, maybe not a CAF IP. Like I'll teach you TR1.
Yeah,
kind of thing. We'll figure out how to put the gear up together.
All right, let's move on.
Yeah, so there's a line at the end of the bar scene there where they're talking about, well, what kind of mission is this that they pulled us all? Like we're the best of the best, whatever. What kind of mission is this? They brought us all back. And Phoenix says, hey, you guys are asking the wrong questions. The question is, we're the best. Who are they going to find to teach us? And I drop my pen. Holy shit. Aside from that comment, she was a really good character.
Yeah.
But that one, I wanted to punch her in the face.
Yeah.
Holy crap, man. I'm going to let you speak to this. The mantra for weapons school is
humble, approachable, credible.
Bingo. If you're standing in a room asking that question, then you did not learn shit.
You did not learn that. I don't know what Top Gun's mantra is, but the mantra for weapons school was humble, approachable, credible, because when you graduate from weapons school, you're the chief instructor in a squadron. You go back to a squadron as the patch, the chief instructor pilot in the squadron, and it's your job to teach, and it's to teach the instructors and all the other guys in the squadron. You can't do that if you're a hangman or, if you're super ego driven. If you're not humble, first of all, the humility piece is important because there's a lot riding, like people expect a high level of performance out of you every day as a patch wearer, but guess what? We're human and we fuck up too, right? And so part of the humility is when you screw up something in the debrief, point it out and let guys know that, hey, we all make mistakes and it's okay, and this is something we can all learn from. But it's also not being an ego-driven asshole like Hangman is, because if you're like that, who's going to come ask you a question?
Yeah,
like nobody's going to want to approach you. That goes into approachability a little bit too, right? Then you want to be approachable, right? You can't be a dick. If there's no stupid question, you've got to be open, because guys, everybody learns at a different level. Everybody learns at a different pace, and everybody learns in different ways, right? And you're supposed to be the guy that they can come to and ask whatever question they have about things. And, if you're, I remember I remember a weapons officer of mine one time just completely berating one of my B course student that I was in the B course with, because he didn't understand They were getting ready for a turkey shoot, and they were trying to do the coefficients on the jets to make the bombs drop better, is basically all that means. And one of the students didn't understand how to do it, and he went and asked the patch about it, and the patch lost his shit. Like,
Yeah.
I don't have time for this. I can't believe you don't. And it's like, dude, he's never seen it before. How would he know, right? So don't be that guy. And then credible. You got to be good at what you do. So you got to have a certain level of credibility. Like you can't go out there and get your ass handed to you every day. Or guess what? Nobody's going to listen to you. You can't suck when you fly. You have to strive for excellence in everything you do, whether that's going out to the range, dropping on the range, air to air. I mean, everything, the briefs, the debriefs, it has to be top notch, high quality all the time, every time.
Yeah. I read this book the other day. It's called Flying in the Wind by Dan Rooney. And he said, he had a line in there, and I'm probably going to misquote it. So if you're listening, please don't hold this against me. But he says, flying fighters is like driving a race car, playing Call of Duty, playing a guitar, and being on a radio talk show all at the same time.
Yeah, it's true.
And just the level of multitasking that we ask these kids to do. I mean, I look at what they're doing nowadays, and I'm like, oh, God, man, I can't believe that we used to do that day in and day out. And no questions.
Yeah.
It's like, this is just what's expected of you.
Yeah.
And I mean, the training pipeline is so long, and it's so spoon-fed and methodical that it's no surprise that by the end of the training course, these kids are at that level. But when they get there and they start in their first few times getting in the cockpit, you're like, oh my God.
Yeah.
Like this is a mountain to climb. And by the end of our careers, we're just like, we're on cruise control. It's like, it's like you just don't even think about it.
Nope.
You get the keys for your jet, and it's like, it's like no big deal. And that's what, we were kind of joking in the beginning of the podcast about, planning this mission up in just a few hours. Like they're making this big deal out of it. Well, if you're the best in the fucking world, man, you should be able to like, cool, just give me my coffee filter lineup card. Let's go.
Yeah.
Anyways, the next scene in the movie is really them getting introduced to what the mission is, and they go into this big thing about, well, these SAMs are lethal and you're going to have to fly in at 100 feet and you're going to pull 9 times the force of gravity.
Yeah.
All right, motherfuckers. Cool guy story here. So I was a strike eagle dude for a lot of years, and the strike eagle, like all of us that wear G suits, we have to go through the centrifuge.
Yep.
Well, the strike eagle, while it can pull 9 Gs, it's for a split second. The one thing the strike eagle does very well is lose energy.
Yeah, it bleeds energy fast.
So we can get 9 Gs for about 0.69 seconds, and then we're falling out of the sky. So for that reason, when we went to the centrifuge, we didn't have to do the 9G profile. We did the 7.5G profile, all right? And we touched 9 for just a second and then back down to 7.5 for like, 30, 40 seconds, whatever it was. Well, when I came down here and had to get into a Viper, I was like, oh, this is a real 9G jet.
It is.
I'm 40 fucking years old, and they sent me back to the centrifuge.
Yeah.
I'm in the centrifuge. This is a true story. I'm in the centrifuge with 2 lieutenants that just got out of UPT, and they're like 24 years old.
The same for me. I was a lieutenant colonel coming off the staff, and they sent me back to the centrifuge.
Yeah, so when we get our website up and running, I'm going to put that video up there of me in the centrifuge at 40 years old. My face is like melting off my face.
Yeah.
And I made it.
Because it's 9 Gs for 15 seconds on the F-16 profile.
Luckily, they let me wear the A-tags flight suit. I didn't have the old shitty 5-bladder, but they made those kids wear the 5-bladder, the old ones. But had it not been for the A-tags, A-tags is like it looks like snow pants.
Yeah.
All right. They're like big fat snow pants. It's really good. But had it not been for that, now I'm not going to confirm or deny that I saw the dot the entire 40 seconds. Sure. But I know how to play the game, and I can grit and I can grunt and keep my eyes open and keep pulling back on that damn stick.
Have any light loss? No.
And yeah, you know the answers to the test by now, right? But yeah, your spine is going to be crushed and the wind is going to be sucked out of your lungs.
It's like an elephant sitting on your chest. Dude, I used to talk to guys flying defense over 8 Gs.
Seriously.
I'm looking over my shoulder, pulling 8.5 Gs going, don't pull yet. You don't set your lift vector yet, not yet, or you're, nope. Let it get whatever.
There's tolerance that gets built up for sure. And, if you ever get a chance to take a long block of leave or maybe you're PCSing or something like that and you're out of the jet for maybe a month or a little bit more, the first ride, it's like, oh, okay. Because, there's a lot of muscles involved in this.
Yeah, the worst for me was always coming back was getting Gisels. Yeah, which is basically like it looks like a rash that you get for the listeners out there because your body's not used to the Gs anymore. And what happens is a bunch of the capillaries on the first couple layers of skin pop, and so you get all these red dots all over you.
It's a rite of passage. And I think that, again, by the end of it, we just got so used to that stuff that it's like, whatever. I mean,
you don't even feel your G suit anymore.
Yeah, these kids are, all those guys in that movie, they're kids. They're probably late 20s, early 30s, and all of them are in really good shape.
Yep.
They don't have any problems.
No.
They don't have any problems with this. And they're weapons school instructors, so they probably do this every day.
Yep.
I mean, in a real fighter squadron, you're going out and pulling G's. Even on a benign sortie, you're 6+.
All the time.
All the time. The pitch out from coming up initial is a 4G pull.
It is.
I mean, it's
if you're
not
doing it right.
Anyways, it's not a big deal. They get into trying to figure out how to fly this low level on time. And this whole, it's a long, drawn-out process. Again, they got 3 weeks to figure out how to fly through a canyon.
Yeah, in 2.5 minutes.
Good God, man. We used to fly through the Bruno Canyon on the way home from the Mountain Home Range, be down in the southern part of the range. And the Bruno Canyon is, it's a fairly deep. You can get down in it and still be 500 feet above the floor, which was our LASDAT limits for a long time. You can still be 500 feet and have canyon walls on both sides of it. And we did that routinely.
Yeah.
Like we would purposely pick targets in the south part of the airspace so that we could run the canyon
on the way home.
On the way home. So anyways, so they're figuring out how to do this, and they're figuring out how to do it in this specified amount of time, which I believe in the beginning was 3 minutes.
It's just 2.5 or 3. I don't remember.
Okay. Where I want to pick this up is where the Admiral, he fires Maverick.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So kind of a body blow to him. This is after a lot of ice.
Yeah, ice dies.
Ice dies, and there's a lot of, good discussion in there between Ice and Maverick and how they've just become really good friends and whatnot. But the Admiral comes in, and something that stood out to me is he lowered the standard. He bumped it up to 4 minutes.
Yep.
And man, I put an asterisk beside that when I wrote it down. And if I could give the listeners a piece of advice around that kind of metaphor, it would be, don't ever expect someone to lower the standard. There's no easy buttons in life. Like, this stuff doesn't happen, right? And when you lower the standard for whatever it is, we're talking from the perspective of being part of what I would call elite teams for several years. When you lower that standard, what are you really doing? You're minimizing or marginalizing your capabilities, and you're accepting mediocrity.
Yeah, that's what you're doing. And that's the issue, because mediocrity can't live in an environment like that, because it's going to get people killed, and people killed fast.
That's right. We went through this back in about 2010. We were talking about having females become part of the tactical air control party. And I think across the community at the time, we didn't care. I was there. I was doing the air liaison officer gig at Fort Campbell with the 101st. And I don't think any one of us cared about the female piece of it. Like, that wasn't the thing. But it was, the point was they were going to try to lower the standards to allow or create new standards for the females. And for example, if the males had to do 60 push-ups, the females would only have to do 40. And we're like, hard stop, dude, because if I'm in a foxhole getting shot at, I need to know that person can pull me out.
Yeah.
And 40 push-ups might not be able to.
Right.
But 60 can. You know, and that's where we kind of drew the line. As far as being in a locker room with a chick, nobody cared.
Yeah.
That wasn't even a discussion point.
Yeah.
If the chick can come in and run a 5-minute mile and do 100 push-ups, hell yeah, let's go.
Yeah.
I think we see the same thing in the fighter pilot community.
Yeah, you do. And you see it in different variations. So, like, I remember when I came back to the 62nd as a weapons officer after weapons school, as you're taking guys through the basic course, there's benchmarks that they have to make. And I was trying to get all the instructors on the same sheet of music as to kind of what the standard of performance was for different rides. Because what's really unfair to students when they're going through the course is when they go, I'm flying with Roscoe today. I got this made. All I have to do is not hit him and I'm going to pass.
Yeah.
Because it's not a demo prof ride, a demonstrate proficiency ride.
Santa Claus.
Or they're flying with CAS and they're like, oh man, if I screw up anything, I'm going to get busted, And so, and I had I had a couple of IPs that are like, because I was like, so they have 4 offensive BFM rides. BFM 4 is Demo Pro. And I'm like, dude, if they can't find a turn circle entry on BFM 3, bust them. Because they're not going to find it on their demonstrate proficiency ride. And now you're just setting them up for failure, because all the Demo Pro rides counted towards DG and all that. There was points that were associated with performance. And I had a couple IPs that are like, well, we can't do that. It's not a demonstrate proficiency ride, blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, but what good are you doing? You're accepting mediocrity and sending a kid who's not prepared for his demonstrate proficiency ride and expecting him to demonstrate proficiency. It makes no fucking sense,
Yeah.
So,
well, there's a fine line there with what you can fix in a debrief and what you can't.
Yeah.
And if the guy can't see that picture, you're not going to fix that in a debrief.
Yeah.
He's got to go out and actually see it at 500 miles an hour.
Yeah, and when you give a kid a chance to fix things before the demonstrate proficiency ride, they typically do better because it's not as stressful as an event. But when you're at the last ride in a phase and now you've busted it once and then now you've busted it twice, like the amount of pressure that they put on themselves is like 10 times more because it's a demo pro ride.
So when I was going through my instructor upgrade, I finally passed DCA, defensive counter air, which is basically we're protecting a target from the hordes of bad guys. Belt-fed red air from the west, and we're protecting the BX and mom and the kids. That grade sheet that I finally passed, it had 4 X's on it. I busted that ride 4 times before I finally... It was so bad that I grabbed a bro of mine. He was an older patch, and I pulled him into my office, and I was like, hey, man, should I be worried about this? He said, has the commander talked to you yet? No. Then just press. Okay.
Yeah.
And I mean, I was trying really hard, but it was like little slip ups in the debrief or little slip ups in execution, and
hard.
Our patch at the time, there was no margin of error.
Yeah.
It was, and rightfully so. I mean, he had a standard and he held the standard, and I'm not arguing that, but man, it was demoralizing to see 4 X's on the fucking grade sheet.
Sure.
Like standing up in front of the, in front of the group, you're briefing a Strike Eagle flight, 2 people per cockpit, 4 cockpits. So 8 people in the room. It's sweaty. It's hot. And I'm supposed to brief these guys on how to go execute this mission. And all of them have copies of my grade sheet going, motherfucker, you don't know what you're talking about. So yeah, it was humbling.
Yeah. And then the last point that I'd make on the standards thing is even if the organization, the people, whatever the case is around you have lowered a standard, don't lower yours. Like keep your personal standard high.
Yeah.
So you want to shine on an organization, that's how you do it.
Yeah, I listen to a few. I have a list of podcasts I listen to, and one of them that I talked to, Andy Frisella, in his Real AF podcast, he always talks about personal excellence is the ultimate rebellion. And just like you said, man, you want to stand out and be that lone wildebeest over here doing your own thing. Man, personal excellence is the way to go, dude.
Yep, it is.
This is why you keep your mind and your body and your soul tight and in balance. And if everybody else is jumping off the bridge, dude, you ain't got to jump off that bridge, man. Yep. Keep your shit together. March to the beat of your own drum, bro. Because eventually, this goes back to our mission statement for the podcast, right?
Yep.
Eventually, those other people's they're gonna see what you're doing.
That's right.
And you're gonna inspire them to change.
Well, and that's why it's important to define values, because if you know who you are and what you're about, you're gonna make good decisions around those things.
Bingo, man. We're tying all this crap together like a big old knot. All right. So more on the mission, then they finally get to where they can half-ass fly down the canyon. And then they're talking about this pop over the mountain. Okay, so in the movie, the target is in the middle of a fucking volcano.
Yeah.
It's a mountain on either side with surface-to-air missiles all around it. And this is what I giggled out loud when they initially pitched the mission to Maverick. And he says, well, on an ordinary day, F-35s would go in there and they just slay the beast, and this would be no big deal. But, there's GPS jamming.
Yeah, I know, right?
Bro.
Whatever.
Bro. We got this. All right. We got this. We trained to this.
Maybe there's a reason Mav wasn't at Top Gun anymore.
Maybe. He's a dinosaur. He's kind of out of the loop. So anyways, they're trying to figure out this pop, and then they go into this discussion about, we got to pull 9 Gs up out of this canyon.
Yeah.
Well,
scary.
The F-18's only rated to 7.5. Well, guess what, dude? You ain't pulling 9.
Yeah.
All right. If it's rated to 8 or to 7.5, that's it.
Yeah.
It's not like, to a degree. Now, the flight control mechanisms in the F-18 are different than what we're used to.
Yeah, I don't know if they have the same.
Theirs it's a McDonnell Douglas jet, so it's very close to what the Strike Eagle does. I mean, that jet, the guts of that jet are almost
similar,
identical to what the Strike Eagle is. So I'm a little bit familiar. It's hydromechanical, electrical, and to a degree, you can drive the stabs down and get G that you might not have known was there. If you're in the right envelope at the right altitudes and the right, right air and things like that. But eventually the computers are going to go, dude, We used to teach guys for BFM turn circle entry to roll, set, pull, and try to pull the top of the stick off, because that's where the stick force sensor at the bottom of the control stick, that electronic signal gets sent down to the computers that might give you a little, maybe 0.1 extra. And that's where we would tell guys to just grab the top of the stick and try to pull it off, so to speak. But
not in the F-16.
But fly-by-wire is a little bit different.
Yep.
But in the F-18, you might get a couple of bumps out of it. But
you ain't going to 12.
not that. I mean, that jet, if you were able to fly that jet home,
yeah, it'd be so bent.
That jet's going on a stick somewhere at the front of some base.
Yeah, it's got cracks in the longerons. It's done.
It's going to have some admiral's name on the side of it, and it's done. You killed it. And then there's this like epic scene. I loved the scene for the instructional point, but this would have never happened, where Maverick steals the F-18.
Oh, yeah.
Steals the F-18 and he goes out and he makes the run.
Yeah.
Right? He does it in 2:14. I think he set the clock for 2:15. He makes it in 2:14. All right, great. Well, he did two things there. One, he proved to the guys that it could be done. Stop your fucking bitching, stop your whining, and let's figure out a way to fix this.
Yep.
There's a solution to this problem. We just have to find it.
Yep.
And if your execution's not up to that level, then we just need to practice, man. Speed will come.
Yep.
Practice on getting it right, and then speed will come. The other thing that he did was, ironically, he proved that it could be done single seat, single jet. So why the fuck are we sending 4?
Yeah. Well, so Maverick is the greatest fighter pilot that's ever lived.
Yeah.
Am I wrong?
Well,
that's the point, right? Maverick's the greatest fighter pilot that ever lived, but he needs Bob to lace his bombs in for him on the attack run.
True. When he's already proven that he can do it by himself.
That's the lamest fucking thing I've ever heard in my life. That's a single seat F-16 driver.
Yeah.
I do not need you lasing in my bombs. I can do it on my own just fine.
There's definitely a time and a place. And coming from a guy who's two-place cockpit, two guys operating at 80% efficiency are going to outperform one guy operating at 100 almost all of the time. If you got two guys in a strike eagle cockpit that are hitting on all 8, and there's a clear division of duties, and everybody is knowing their role and executing their role at a high level, we're going to outperform a single-seat jet just from an overwhelming standpoint and the ability to process information.
I can understand maybe the process piece to a certain extent, although I did a lot of pretty heavy seed and deed work in my day, controlling not just a 4-ship, but an entire seed package of 12 or 16 jets and keeping track of where all the strikers are. So, but there's probably some truth to that.
Well, there's a reason that you're sitting over here telling these stories, and maybe some other people weren't operating at that level.
That's true.
I can tell you that some of my best sorties were the ones where there were not a lot of words said in the cockpit. It was just silent execution.
Yeah.
You know your role. I know my role. We're going to high five on the ramp at the end of this. We killed everybody. We shacked our targets, and maybe 5 words were said inside the cockpit. But that's just from an efficiency standpoint. For the mission that they were doing, so much wrong with the way it was planned, how it was flown.
Yeah, it's Hollywood.
So much wrong with all that. But I think at the end, when they actually drop in and they start flying, I mean, obviously Rooster has this, he has his coming out.
Moment,
he has his coming out party there in the middle of the thing, and Maverick has his little proud dad moment, and then he gets to go have his savior complex, by taking the missile and all that. But across the board, before they even took off, what did you think about the selection of Rooster over Hangman? I mean, you kind of saw it coming. But.
Yeah, well, I mean, again, Hollywood. So real world, based on execution, I think Hangman probably would have been picked for that spot just because you knew he was probably going to execute the game plan to a higher level than Rooster was. The only negative to Hangman was just the team piece of it. But, I mean, fuck, you're just a 4-ship. What does it matter at that point for what you're doing? I mean, it's a low level to drop bombs and then run like hell to get out.
He would have flown in as number 3.
Yeah. So
and he
wasn't in charge anyway. So
he would have executed, no questions asked.
Yeah. So, yeah, that's what I think about it. But it doesn't fit the storyline.
Valid. I thought the same things. I thought if I were a squadron commander, if I were a flight lead in charge of picking my own flight, it would have been Hangman. And that's just from a execution standpoint.
I definitely would have picked Phoenix and Bob, though.
Oh, 100%.
Yeah.
They kicked ass.
They're awesome.
When they punched out, guys that have punched out of jets.
Yeah.
How long was it before they got back to flying?
Oh, months typically, because usually, depending on the nature of why, I mean, it just depended. Depending on the nature of why they punched out, sometimes there was a flight evaluation board that took place afterwards, to see if there was any fault. But it was at least a few weeks, you know, for guys that punched.
So the realism of them going on that mission is probably...
No.
It's not going to happen.
It's low, yeah.
You punch out of a jet, you're going to be sitting soft or top 3 for a little bit.
Sitting for a bit.
Yep.
Yeah, I totally forgot that happened, yeah.
Yeah. Now, I did a little bit of research yesterday, just looking up some stuff, and one cool thing that I read was that the body can sustain up to 46 Gs in small doses. Now, I don't know how they got this data, but I thought that was kind of interesting. And then by small doses, I mean like microseconds probably.
Yeah. Everything starts to turn to goo inside otherwise. Yeah.
Well, and then the other piece that I was reading about was how many ejections have there been over the Mach? And I remember being told this story when I was going through the...
I don't know, but I wouldn't want to be over the Mach punching out, I'll tell you that.
Yeah, well, they told the story when I was in the B course.
Yeah,
and
there was injuries.
There was a Strike Eagle crew that ejected over the whiskey areas east of North Carolina, and they were above the Mach. And the Wizzo died. The pilot broke almost every bone in his arms and legs, yet somehow was able to drag his ass. I think he had like one half of one good arm and was able to get himself inside of his raft, and he survived. And he told the story about it and how he just, it was like as soon as the canopy came off, his helmet went with it. It's like, I mean, just that, it's like hitting a brick wall. Yeah. And I was an
F5 tornado, or even like a whatever. What's the highest hurricane? They're only like 200 miles an hour.
Yeah.
If you're over the Mach, man, you're doing like...
you're doing 6 bills.
You're over 600 miles an hour easy, depending on the altitude.
Yeah, for sure. And then, I mean, with altitude, that just complicates things. Yeah. Because now not only do you have flailing injuries, it's fucking cold, man.
And if your helmet gets ripped off and there's no oxygen at altitude,
boom,
that's a mistake. That could be a bummer too.
Your eyeballs freeze, your nose hairs freeze. So nothing good happening there. But I was reading in a couple of these forums about ejecting over the Mach, and one person just came right out and said, hey, could Maverick have really punched out at what was he, 10.4, I think, at the end?
Hell
something
no.
like that. And Neil deGrasse Tyson, he answered in the forum. I thought this was great. He answered in the forum, and he goes, no.
Yeah.
His body would have been like a bug splat.
Yeah, it would have.
Like hitting a wall of air like that at that speed.
Would have ripped him to pieces.
No, You're just a wad of goo at the end of that. So Maverick gets his little savior complex and he goes down. And then Rooster has to turn around and have one of his own. So you take a guy who could barely fight BFM, wouldn't push it up in the canyon runs, and now all of a sudden he's going back into the super mez to take one for the team
against all the Sues
and go find his
Sam's.
quote unquote daddy. Yeah, I thought that was a little.
It's Hollywood.
True, but that guy would probably never fly a jet again.
Nope.
If he did that in the real world, he'd never fly a jet again.
With the 3-star on the deck saying RTB.
Bring him home.
Yeah, there's no way, man. You'd be done.
He's done. So they're on the ground. They had this cool little exchange about, you told me not to think.
Yeah.
Okay. And then they go steal the F-14, which was badass.
Yeah.
That was, I mean, aside from the fact that it would have never, ever, ever happened.
Or flown.
It was so cool. Just the idea that they're just like, yeah, fuck it. We got nothing else to lose.
Yeah.
Like, we're going to freeze to death out here. Let's go try to steal the Tomcat,
Yeah.
Well, that was pretty cool.
Didn't follow any of their survive, evade, resist, escape protocols or any of their comm protocols. Like nothing.
None.
Let's go to the closest enemy base and steal an airplane. Yeah.
And they had this they stare each other down and they're like, well, what do you want to do? I don't know. What do you want to do?
I know.
Oh, let's go steal a jet. Sounds like a great idea.
Yeah.
So do you know how to work the maintenance carts out on the line?
A couple of them.
Yeah.
Yeah, but only because of deployed ops and only because I tried to make it a point to spend time and hang out with my maintenance guys.
Mm-hmm. I could have probably gotten through it. It would have taken me a lot longer than 30 seconds.
Yeah, I could have started an air cart. I'd have no idea what pressure it would need to be to fire off the motor.
The only reason that I would have known even where to start is because I was a crew chief for 8 years.
Yeah.
And I'm kind of familiar with how those things work. And at least I can, recognize the language on it because it's not intuitive. It's not like, and for the listeners, you don't get a set of keys and walk out to your F-16 and go, you know, no, there's a million switches that you got to do, and there's timing, and there's a certain sequence of events. And if you don't know that sequence, then the shit ain't gonna work.
Yep.
You know, and those maintenance carts aren't any different. Yet Maverick not only knew it, but he could communicate it to Rooster in 20 seconds, and he executed flawlessly.
Yeah.
Not one single hiccup.
Yeah.
With that.
After not flying it
I
for 20
need
years.
you to crank this and give me power to that, and then pull all the pins, and then put the ladder up, and then get in the jet.
Yeah, most guys wouldn't know how to pull all the pins in their jet either, probably.
Seriously.
I mean, how many times did you have to teach a young guy in a cross country? You know, when you're
Pull your
going to a
pins
flag, but you don't have tankers, and so you land somewhere and you're like, all right, dude, let me walk you around the jet. This is what we need to check. This is what we got to pull.
That was a bit of comedy, and then pile onto it. So they both finally get in the cockpit. Rails clear. Okay, canopy comes down. And miraculously, in 2022, this movie came out in 22, the harnesses that they were wearing matched up perfectly with the Rogue Nation F-14 ejection seat.
Yeah.
And so clip, now we're in the jet.
Yeah.
Like
awesome possum.
Yeah, I don't think so.
Yeah.
I don't know what ejection seats were in the F-14.
I don't either.
The F-18s were Aces 2 seats.
Yeah. So just so you guys know, when we fly, we put harnesses on, and because the parachute's actually packed in the seat. And so you have basically the riser straps come over your shoulders, and you click them into your harness before you take off, so that if you have to eject, you're attached to the parachute in the seat. That's what Roscoe's talking about.
Yeah. I was happy to see that when they had that scene of Maverick laying there in the snow, kind of waking up from his ejection, at least he had his mask down and his visor up. So that was, what was it? A canopy visor mask.
C-Kid LPU, four-line prepare and land.
Four-line prepare and land. Yeah.
How did he do it, though, if he was unconscious?
Well, was he unconscious from the crash landing in the snow, or the getting shot down from the jet? These are questions we'll just never know.
I guess that's true. There are a lot of guys that black out on ejection because it's like 26 instantaneous G's when you pull the handles, and so they go out, but they usually wake up in the chute.
Yeah, well, it's just lack of oxygen in the brain, I guess.
Yeah.
Not unlike pulling 9 G's for a sustained period. If you don't get on your G string,
that's very true.
This is how we lose kids, just graying out, and they're augering in a perfectly good jet because they didn't squeeze their ass cheeks.
Yep.
You know, it's something that simple. There's so much technique that goes into that. All right, so they steal the F-14, and then they've got to fight the big bad Su-57 5th-gen fighters, who also are not affected by the GPS jamming, surprisingly. Not that an F-35 could have done any better. It, too, like a Strike Eagle, it likes to lose energy and fall to the dirt. But
good jazz planning by a joint engagement zone planning by a foreign country, too. They're usually not that good at that.
How'd that deconfliction go, I wonder?
They're usually not that good at that kind of deconfliction. Yeah. That's awesome.
They didn't understand the hand signals with each other, and then Maverick just pulls some of that pilot shit out of his ass and shoots down a couple of them. That was pretty neat. I thought that was pretty neat when they were saddling up on the one, and he does that like flat plate.
Yeah, where he split the power on the motors and kicked the rudder.
Well, and the Su-27 or the Su-57.
Oh, that one, yeah.
He just stops like this, and you can see the vapor trails coming off the wings, and that big puffy marshmallow cloud around it, and all that.
You ever fought the F-22?
Yeah, that's where I was going to go with this. It's like we started out.
They got a ton of Z-axis capability.
Again, Strike Eagles fall to the dirt. That's what they do good. And so we would start off 6K offensive, and within about 120 degrees, we're defensive.
Yeah.
Terminate, set up another. Yeah. Like those guys, there's a significant amount of maneuverability in those jets.
Especially with the thrust vectoring and stuff too. It's actually more just their Z-axis capability than it is the vectoring from what I understand. But yeah,
I don't know.
It's impressive.
There's a
just go up. Well, you couldn't go up in the in the Strike, but
we could, but just
in the Viper, I'd just go up.
You know, where we made a lot of money was get you guys into the control zone and then kind of do the put on the brakes and he'll fly right by kind of thing. Yeah. We just flat plate it, and we would hope that we could get you into a tree fight.
A stack.
And if we could get you into a tree fight, then we could lose energy better than you, spit you out front, and do either a pirouette or a raking gunshot or something like that. That was really the only hope that we had out of a superior turning adversary.
I loved it when you guys flat plated because I think my highest was 53 frames.
Yeah, it's a tennis court, man. It's a big old dark gray tennis court. All right, so we steal the thing, and then Hangman comes in and blows up the last dude That was pretty awesome. Yeah, he got his little piece. He's going to get an air medal out of it. But then he flies right through the fucking wreckage.
I know.
And he fought it out both of his motors. Now he's ejecting over the ocean.
Exactly.
Yeah, so
Hollywood.
Never would have happened.
Nope.
All right, never would have happened. And then we get back on the deck, and everybody's friends. Bob and Phoenix are, I don't even remember seeing them in the closing scene.
Yeah.
But they were heroes. You know,
Yeah,
they lazed in the bombs and blowed the thing up. Maverick closes it out with a big old bro hug with Rooster, and it looks like they kissed and made up finally. And then, of course, you got that Maverick, Iceman. Now it's Rooster and Hangman. Hey, you can be my wingman anytime.
Yeah.
Kind of thing. So who learned what through the course of the movie? What did Maverick learn, either about himself or about his boys? You know, what was his big character arc? What was his big takeaway from the whole thing?
If I was going to wager a guess, I would say that from what we were talking about previously, the way that I see it was Maverick's identity was completely wrapped up in being a fighter pilot.
Mm-hmm.
So,
he said as much.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm a fighter pilot. I'm not an instructor.
That's right.
Okay, whatever.
Yeah.
And that's what led to, I think, the ego, the loner, the rules don't apply to me. I don't have any accountability, or if accountability is placed on me, I'm going to push back hard, kind of a thing. And I think at the end of it, what he realized, whether it was the professional piece with Rooster and executing the mission, or even the personal piece with whoever the gal is that's the love interest in it,
Penny Benjamin,
swinging back around to that, right? That there's more to life than just being a fighter pilot, right?
Yeah.
It was more about letting go of those things. So, because we've talked about this on the podcast too, right? What are the messages that you've received in your life so far? Because Maverick always had the chip on his shoulder, right? Like he wasn't good enough. That was the message that he always get. And he was never going to be good enough because of who his daddy was. And then he lost Goose and he wasn't good enough. And so there's that constant message that he's gotten his entire life that he never really overcame, which is probably why he was a complete dick most of the time. And then he also recognized, he even says in the movie at one point, I wish I would have handled that relationship. I tried to be the father to him that he didn't have after Goose died, and I wish I would have done a better job. And so I think what it is at the end is he's recognized these regrets that he's had in his life, mostly driven by his fucked up ego.
Yeah.
And it's a little bit of he's starting to shift away from that finally.
There was a scene in the middle of the movie that I think was kind of his turning point, and that was when they were doing the shirtless football, which, by the way, man, there's nothing like a good shirtless volleyball on a Saturday afternoon. I mean, I know you probably did that a lot. I know I did. I would always go in and get my dog
all the
tags.
time, yeah.
Now, were you the guy, did you wear your blue jeans, or were you a sweatpants guy?
Yeah, I like the runner shorts.
Oh, okay.
The high
panties.
ones. Yeah, Ranger panties were my favorite. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. That's just a good way to kill time and really build some good team camaraderie, some shirtless.
Because I was never sleeping off a hangover on Saturday morning after Friday night at the O Club.
God, no, man. Or roll call or something.
No, nothing.
But at the end of during the football scene, right, he's going, hey, we're doing dogfight football, which was kind of a cool concept. But he walks away from the game. He scored his touchdown.
Yeah.
All right, great. But he walks away from the game, and he's sitting in his chair, and he's just got this ear-to-ear grin. And I couldn't help but sit there and think, I was like, that is a proud dad moment right there.
Yeah.
That you could tell that he was just enjoying watching the kids play.
Yeah.
And I know I've been there, man. I did this last Friday night. I went out and played basketball with all the boys, and there was a couple of times where we had this Mexican kid out there playing with us, doesn't speak English. He works with Nikki. And I was just having to tap him on the shoulder and point to a guy to get him to go play defense. Like, he didn't speak any English. It was really cool. But there was one point late in the evening where I threw him the ball. He's like 3 feet from the basket, and I'm at half court, and I said out loud, I'm like, please let this kid score a basket.
Yeah.
And he finally made one.
Nice.
And you could just see, man, and I don't know who was more happy, me or him.
Yeah.
But I think that, especially sitting in where we're sitting now, those proud dad moments are a lot of fun.
Yeah.
And I think that Maverick really had one there. And I think it happened at the end of the movie too, where, him and Rooster, they kind of had they got it out of their system.
Yeah, they got it out of their system. They're
they did.
working on the P-51 together.
Yeah, they went to the mattresses and they got it out of their system, and then they were able to just kind of look at each other, and you could just tell this look on Maverick's face was like he had a proud dad moment, and I think that was an interesting way for him to turn a corner there, going from, like you said, I'm kind of the solo dude, a loner, probably why he ended up in the test environment. There were glimpses of it early on where he goes, yeah, I know what's going to happen to the rest of the team if I don't do this. But then to see that really come to fruition at the end of the movie, I thought was really neat.
Yeah.
I think that compassion and that pride of maybe, stepping into a new role, I really think that was pretty cool. And almost along the same lines, Rooster had a neat kind of close up or wrap up there. What was his big kind of end game?
What do you think it was?
Well, I think he gained some confidence for sure. And he learned a lesson in sometimes you just have to go for it. You can't overanalyze everything, and you definitely can't play it safe all the time. Sometimes you got to accept some risk, and when we're doing mission planning and even in execution, we talk about operational risk. We talk about tactical levels of risk.
What's the commander's intent?
And what's the acceptable
level of risk?
Exactly.
That's how you're going to build your game plan.
What's the ALR? What's the TLR? What's the ORM? And we go into missions and we try to mitigate as much as we can. But man, there comes a time where you just got to say, fuck it.
Yep.
I got to get these bombs on this target, or I got to kill this bad guy, or he's just going to wreck. He's going to fuck our couch, man.
Yeah.
And I think that Rooster maybe learned a good lesson about that. Stop playing it safe all the time.
Yeah, and I think that too, you're right. There was probably those messages that he had carried, whether it was, Maverick doesn't think I'm good enough, or whatever he was fighting from his having lost his dad and what he was trying to prove. And, that event allowed him to overcome that.
Yeah. Yeah, I think he was able to kind of put some of that behind him.
Yep.
For sure. Hangman learned a lesson, I think, in
humility a little bit.
For sure. This is something that I've been telling the boys since they were old enough to understand it, is sometimes the best team doesn't win. Sometimes the best dude doesn't get the job. Maybe you were outperformed at that moment. How many times on Saturday afternoons do we see a scrub team beat a top-level team in football?
Yeah, sure.
You see it every year. You see these Cinderellas, or you see somebody beat a team that they weren't supposed to beat, going for job interviews. Maybe you're better than that dude on paper, but for whatever reason they picked him. I've fallen into that category a couple of times.
Sure.
Sometimes it sucks, man. Sometimes it's a tough pill, but I go back to know your role and execute that role well. And I thought Hangman did that in the end.
Yeah, he did.
He was given an opportunity to learn a lesson, and he learned that lesson.
Yep. And
then Bob, I'm not even really sure that Bob really changed.
Bob didn't change. Bob was solid throughout.
I think
man.
He was just pretty flat.
Be like Bob. Yeah. That's the message of this. Be one. Be like Bob.
Be like Bob. Yeah. That's how we'll close it out.
Yes,
just be like Bob. That's awesome. Overall, Top Gun Maverick, 3 thumbs up.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, it was. I thought it did a decent job of paying respects to the first movie. The cinematography that they did in this movie was phenomenal. Yeah. Like, that's probably as good of a picture of what you're going to see or ever get of what it's actually like to be in a high performance fighter aircraft, and just the strain, the pull, the speed, all of it. And then Hollywood should have hired us to come up with a tactical game plan, because theirs fucking sucked.
I was talking to, we had a guy come through the schoolhouse here. He was an 06, and he had been at Fallon for the last couple of years. And he and I were sitting at the console one day, just kind of talking. And he says, yeah, man, I came to work one day, and there was a whole bunch of civilians there, and they told us to all leave our cell phones outside, and they brought us into this little theater and everything. And they showed them all the raw footage from where the Blue Angels were contracted out to
fly most of
that stuff, because there was some close formation flying that we really don't do on a daily basis.
Well, and there was some of the shots too, like when they're coming in when their feet wet coming in over the land for the attack run, where that shot out of the bottom of that F-18. I mean, he couldn't have been more than 10 feet off the surface of the water.
Yeah. Seriously.
And a couple of the desert shots where they're down low like that too, in that valley, I mean, that had to be one of the blues.
Yeah. How about that attack formation? Assume attack formation. And they all move right to his dead six. I'm like, you assholes.
The lamest thing I've ever seen in my life.
Spread it out, assholes. But yeah, he was telling me about the raw footage. He goes, dude, the raw footage is better than the cut up footage.
I bet it is.
And it was like 15 minutes straight of just raw F-18s just slinging jets at each other.
That's cool.
Yeah, that had to have been badass to be able to see that. What else we got on Top Gun Maverick?
I think that's it, man.
We drew it back to our values. We told some cool guy stories.
Yeah. Like I said, big takeaways are just, a lot of these guys are dealing with previous messaging and not dealing with those things, or maintaining good relationships, or being completely ego driven. And a lot of that derives from them probably not really understanding who they really are and having gone through the process of defining core values and then figuring out how to practice and walk in that integrity.
Yeah, all valid.
Except for Bob. Be like Bob.
Yeah. Bob's probably been shit on a few times in his career or his life. He's learned that lesson of humility.
Yeah.
I think for the listeners, man, especially for the younger guys, realize that, the majority of the characters in this movie are in your age group. They're probably 30 or younger, maybe slightly over 30. None of them really had families, I don't think. At least they weren't alluded to in the movie.
Nope.
And they're still figuring this shit out.
Yeah, for
right?
sure.
They're still learning lessons, man. And I just told you a story about a lesson that I learned when I was in my mid-30s. So if you're feeling like you're constantly getting your junk kicked in by life, don't get discouraged.
Yeah.
Keep your head up and keep moving forward, because you'll eventually get it.
Yep.
We've said it a million times. This is a journey.
It's a process.
It is. It's a process and it's a journey. And we saw it in every character that we talked about, except for maybe Bob. They had a turning point. There was some significant event or some learning opportunity that they took advantage of, and they were able to either redefine or begin to walk in their values. And I thought that was unique in that. So please, from the 18 to the 32-year-olds, keep your chin up. Keep moving forward.
Yeah, for sure.
Parting shots?
Nope. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Be the one.
Be like Bob. Thanks for flying with the Be One Change One podcast. If you got something out of this show, then be the one and share it in your circles of influence.
You can be our wingman through our website at www.be1change1.com. That's B and the number 1, change and the number 1.com.
We invite you to be the one and join our fighter squadron on social media at Be1Change1 on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. You can follow us at Paul Roscoe White on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn, as well as Roscoe's website, www.paulroscoewhite.com.
You can email us from the website, and please leave comments, share, and ask questions, or leave ideas of things you would like to discuss on future podcasts. Most importantly, be the one that helps us win the algorithm by leaving a review on whatever platform you're listening on.
Thanks for joining. Until next time, be the one.